This is West Michigan's Morning News. Steve Kelly, Brett Bikita, Rick Albin, Lauren Smith, all smartphone owners. And smartphone owners because of work. On the live line with us this morning, communications analyst, author of The Old School Advantage, Jim Whidden, back with us. Jim, we've talked about smartphone overuse, about addiction, about problems in school, in your personal life. But let's talk specifically about the workplace. And the thing that I find ironic about this is a lot of companies force employees into using these things so they can be available all the time. But now texting is a problem in the workplace. Tell us more.
Well, good morning. That's the irony. I think it's not just about communication, which is what these devices do such a good job of allowing us to do. It's about connection. We can use these rectangles, which we're surrounded by. I'm looking at 4 of them right now. But we don't want to overuse them, as you mentioned, or abuse them, and that's what's happening. And on a personal level, we have, we've been told all our life if we have 1 or 2 really good friends, we should consider ourselves fortunate. Today, it's more about 1,000 likes than a couple of friends. And that's an issue both personally and in the workplace, I think. Some practical applications in the workplace. Very simply, when you come to work in the morning, have personal discipline to designate the first hour of the day a no-tech hour and see what happens to your productivity. I think if a worker did this, then there might be less stress and more productivity, thus making the boss happy. And maybe they wouldn't care so much about how much you're using your phone if you were just disciplined in some small ways like this.
Well, obviously, you're talking about a different work environment than we're in because we're connected 24/7. And I recently was gone for a week and didn't turn on my work phone for multiple days at a time, which is something that almost never happens, and found that there is a way to relax, and that's the beginning of it. But what about the idea that, I mean, we're required to be on social media. We're required to be in contact with people on a daily basis. How do you step away when that's your job?
Well, I think it's going to be a more difficult task in a case like yours because you do need to be connected to the world. And breaking news, I think, is pretty much the mantra in terms of what you do. So there may be an exception there, unfortunately. But I think for the majority of Americans in their workplace, that is not necessarily the case. If I were interviewing you, which I'm not, I would love to ask questions like, how did you feel during that week when you were disconnected? I'm sure it made a difference and probably made you a better employee when you came back to work, even though there was a storm of media contacts waiting for you when you arrived back in the office.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how they felt. I was a better employee.
Roman philosopher Seneca, so if you want to really go back old school, he said to be everywhere is to be nowhere. And a modern way to kind of have the same thought is to think of it this way. In consuming data, we're consuming ourselves. And so if we think about it from that standpoint, I think we can either consciously or subconsciously begin to make some incremental changes that will optimize our use of the data machines, if you will, but at the same time, maybe bring us back. I think we've lost ourselves. It's interesting. I also think back, if we're thinking old school, I think back to Ben Franklin, the famous line where he came out of the Constitutional Convention, and the woman said, what have you given us? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. And now I'm thinking, I see Steve Jobs standing outside the convention and, what have you given us? And you've got a miracle machine if you can harness it. In other words, these things have the capability of controlling us if we don't control them first, both personally and in the workplace.
Communications analyst Jim Whidden, as always, a pleasure. Thank you, Jim.
I've got 2 iPhones and 2 iPads. Excuse me, I got to go to the trash now.
7:42. Let's get to traffic and weather. Kevin Richards, what's the latest?